The Nakba never ended.
When your land is taken, your home is destroyed, your family is martyred, and over 75% of our grandparents' land that was taken, it wasn't this accidental outcome of war. It was the execution of a very strategic European settler colonial project. They were calling me things like a 15-year-old suicide bomber, an ISIS recruiter who needs to be burnt alive, and also we shouldn't expect quick wins. It's a long game and we might not see the change tomorrow.
Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakeel is something we see in every Palestinian video.
You're exactly what this movement, what this moment needs.
The Nakba never ended. The Nakba, or the catastrophe, it wasn't just a moment in 1948. It is a reality that has lived on for 77 years. It is in the bulldozed homes of Gaza. It's in the children laying underneath the rubble. It's in the olive trees ripped away from the West Bank. It's in the silence of classrooms where students are told not to utter the words genocide or to speak up about Palestine. It's in the grave of every journalist. It's in the scream of every mother. It's in the question of every child that is asking, where is the world? Today we're joined by none other than Leanne Mohammad, British Palestinian activist who ran as an independent candidate for Ilford North in the British general elections. She came just within 500 votes of toppling the current health secretary of Kier Starmer's cabinet, tipped by some to be the next prime minister. We will be talking about the Nakba of yesterday and how the Nakba and the legacy of the Nakba inspires us today. Leanne Mohammad, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to The Thinking Youth.
Wa alaikum assalam, and thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Let's begin with a foundational question. The Nakba is often framed as a past historical trauma, but for many Palestinians, it's an ongoing experience in real time today. What does the Nakba mean to the younger generation of Palestinians, both in terms of 77 years ago, but also the current horrors that we're seeing today?
I think the main thing to understand about the Nakba is that it is ongoing. The Nakba never ended. And we have to start by breaking it down. So what does Nakba mean? Nakba is the Arabic word for catastrophe. And the biggest example of this catastrophe is what we are witnessing right now, the live stream genocide in Gaza. The Nakba was never this one-time historical event. In fact, we are witnessing the most destructive chapter of this continuing Nakba in Gaza today. And it's this catastrophe that began in 1948 that continues today across Palestine and throughout the whole Palestinian diaspora. And when we talk about 77 years ago, we're talking about the Nakba referring to the forced expulsion of over 750,000 Palestinians, the destruction of more than 500 towns and villages. We're talking about over 15,000 Palestinians who were killed and over 75% of our grandparents' land that was taken during the creation of this Israeli state. This process, what we need to understand, it wasn't this accidental outcome of war. It was the execution of a very strategic European settler colonial project. And this project aimed to establish a Jewish majority on as much Palestinian land as possible. And at the time, Zionist forces, later incorporated into the Israeli army, they carried out systematic campaigns of ethnic cleansing. We saw this in massacres such as Deir Yassin. We saw expulsions in cities like Lid, cities like Haifa, where my grandparents are from. And this explicitly targeted civilian populations. Palestinian refugees were forcibly expelled and they were left with whatever they could carry on their backs. And I always say, growing up and in the past, my grandparents would tell me of their story. I always believed that, okay, if there was access to the internet, if they had access to digital media, social media in 1948, like we do today, then they could have live streamed the genocide in real time. They could have live streamed the Nakba, the ethnic cleansing, the occupation, and that the international community would have intervened to prevent it. I always thought, okay, my grandparents would have not been refugees. They would still be living in their home in Palestine if that happened. But what we've really learnt, this over the past 2 years is that we were really naive because it's never been about a lack of evidence. It's about the very refusal to see us Palestinians as human beings in the first place. My grandparents were among those 750,000 Palestinians in 1948 who were forcibly expelled by Zionist militias. And they ended up as refugees in Lebanon. But like so many others, they thought that it would be only a matter of a few days, maybe weeks, at most months, till they returned. But they never returned, and they were permanently forced out of their homes and their homeland. And this just shows, the Nakba wasn't just a one-off event of expulsion. It's an ongoing process that we have all been witnessing live and televised. It's why we also have the right of return. So many Palestinians left with keys in their hands in 1948, in the same way that many Palestinians in Gaza left their homes a year ago, the year before that, with keys in their hands, ready to return to their homes. But what we're seeing is the complete ethnic cleansing of an entire population. And so the continuing genocide in Gaza shows us the Nakba, it's not a distant memory. It is an ongoing structure of violence. And when we mark 77 years of the Nakba, it has to be more than symbolic. It has to be a call to end the ongoing genocide in Gaza. It has to be a call to uphold international law and to support the Palestinian people in their right to freedom, their right to justice, and in their right to return home.
There's a common phrase people often cite. History is often written by the victors, where we see groups where there's more predominant military dominance, they seem to triumph, and their narrative of events are the ones that they themselves want to prevail. Yet there's something special and different about the Nakba. By contrast, you see Palestinians seem to remember such pain and horrors with, yes, sadness, but also with incredible resilience, stuff we haven't ever seen before. Especially the younger generation that inherited a legacy that is painful yet dignified. What makes the Palestinian people so resilient despite going through unimaginable pains?
I actually think the answer to this is very simple, and that is that our resilience comes from our faith. Palestinians have faith in Allah's justice. We know our cause is just, and we know that Allah is the best of planners. What we're seeing right now is when your land is taken, your home is destroyed, your family is martyred, we're still seeing Palestinians saying Alhamdulillah, and that's not weakness. People are seeing it as weakness, but it's power that most people can't even understand. And our hope, our sabr, our faith in Allah's justice is not naive. In fact, it's rooted in Allah's promises in the Quran to us. And I always say this to people, I try to remind them that we know that Palestine will be free. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And right now, that when is nearer than it has ever been. In the same way that justice, it might not come today or tomorrow, but it will come. And, it might not come from the UN or the ICC or whatever, but it will definitely come from the one who sees everything. Palestinian resilience and hope, it doesn't come from the illusion of, okay, one day there will be political change, or soon a ceasefire will come, or any of these worldly alliances. It comes from promises in the Quran, and that the oppressed are never forgotten by Allah. So, the verse, فَإِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا, indeed with hardship comes ease. It's a very simple but powerful message of hope. And you have the verse from Surah Al-Imran, وَلَا تَحْسَبَنَّ الَّذِينَ قُتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَمْوَاتًا بَلْ أَحْيَاءٌ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ يُرْزَقُونَ. Never think of those martyred in the cause of Allah as dead. In fact, they are alive with their Lord, well provided for. And I truly believe that the people of Gaza have shown us the highest level of Iman, and not just Iman, but Rida as well, this contentment with Allah's decree. And that kind of hope is unshakable. But why is it unshakable? It's because it's not tied to this world. Palestinians are almost grounded in something that is completely eternal. And subhanAllah, we realize it is they who come us because they are closer to the divine than most of us have ever been. And it's honestly one of the most profound things we've witnessed in our time. When everything around them is collapsing, we're seeing complete families being killed and wiped out. We're seeing homes destroyed, basic needs stripped away, and we just expect despair. But yet we see Palestinians under siege in Gaza being the ones reminding us and the rest of the Ummah to have faith, to be patient, and to trust Allah. And that kind of spiritual composure, it doesn't come from nowhere. So again, it's incredibly humbling. And it's a lesson for the rest of us, how strong is our iman really? How deeply do we trust qadar? Resilience has almost become at the heart of Palestinian identity, I feel. The people of Gaza, they're not passive victims, they are active believers who submit to Allah's qadar. And it's about trusting that, what He wills has wisdom, even if it comes with immense suffering. And we know that death is not the end. You know, the people currently killed, the martyrs, they are shuhada. So death they see as a passage to divine rewards, and that transforms how they suffer. It transforms, you know, why they hope and how they comfort others. So at the end of the day, Islam teaches us that truth will rise, oppression always has an expiry date, and justice will prevail. And that's why Palestinians keep going, because they know that, you know, this life is temporary, this world is a test, and this isn't our final destination. The world isn't the final judge, Allah is. And that's a kind of resilience that you can never kill.
SubhanAllah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is your brother Mazen Mukhtar, the CEO of Baitulmaal. The month of Muharram is the first month of the year and one of the 4 sacred months mentioned in the Quran. It is a time of reflection and remembrance and recommitment to faith. Let us turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this month and seek His mercy through charity. You can provide emergency aids. You can provide food, clean water, shelter, education to families who pray for relief. May Allah accept their prayers through the compassion of our donors through you. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
The Nakba is a large part of your story and the story of your family, as well as the story of every Palestinian family. But on the other hand, Nakba denial is a growing problem. From our campuses to mainstream media, where the word Nakba itself is often outright, ahistorically, denied by many Zionists. I mean, this unfactual Zionist narrative instead claims that the expulsion of the Palestinians was actually a quote-unquote war of independence. Israel fears Palestinian memories. Zionism fears Palestinian memory. Why do you think they try so hard to control this narrative?
I think the word Nakba, it directly challenges this dominant narrative that they have carefully constructed over decades. And it's one that they depend on. And this is the narrative that we've seen that has shaped media, it's shaped policy, it's shaped so much public perception. But then the Nakba tells a very different story, and it tells the truth. It shatters that myth and it tears everything apart for them. So the Nakba tells the truth. It exposes the brutal reality of 1948, which was the forced displacement of over 750,000 Palestinians, the ethnic cleansing, the destruction, and the ongoing injustice that followed. And to admit the Nakba is to admit that, you know, Israel's founding wasn't this glorious birth. They talk about this Independence Day, but it was a catastrophe, and it was one that was marked by colonial violence, one that was marked by dispossession and profound suffering for so many Palestinians. And in fact, you know, the Nakba that started in 1948 shattered Palestinian lives. That was what shattered it all for us. And so to acknowledge that is to almost confront this uncomfortable reality that the creation of the settler colonial state of Israel came with immense human cost. And this undermines the whole legitimacy of their narrative. And it also exposes a legacy of colonial violence that many Western powers supported at the time and frankly still do today, you know, in their ongoing complicity.
Leanne, why do you think there's such a weird obsession or a focus on controlling what words Palestinians and those who support the freedom of Palestinians use? I mean, there's such a strange discourse attacking the free speech of young students on campuses. Recently, we've seen many valedictorians in the United States at top universities dedicate their entire graduation speeches to Palestine. They're using words like the Nakba. They're using words like genocide, like intifada. What's so significant about the use of language here? The
most important thing to realize here is that the words that we use matter, right? And this is something they fear as well, because they challenge the status quo and they get people to pause and historically go back, and they're like, oh wait, what do these words actually mean? And so the word Nakba is threatening because it's not just about history, right? It's about living memory, the continued occupation, the exile, the genocide. And the Nakba threatens an entire foundation on which Western and Zionist political power rests. It forces them to wake up to the reality, and you know, it demands accountability, right? We are demanding accountability and justice, and this is something that they deeply fear, and that's why they suppress it. You know, you're telling the truth about how the whole thing started, and that scares people who kind of built their whole political career on erasing that history. So language is power, and they know it, right? And that's why that's why there's so much backlash, because if you can control the language, you can control the narrative. And if you can control the narrative, then you control what people believe is even possible. And, once we start saying these words so much, we reveal the cracks in their system. And then once people start speaking freely, it's hard to shut them up again. And that's what we're seeing right now with these fearless, courageous, brave students who are refusing to be quiet, who are refusing to water down their words, because they know that every time they say Nakba, anytime they say genocide, they're reclaiming the truth. And they are saying it how it is. They refuse to be complicit. And so ultimately, these words, they don't just threaten a narrative. They shatter a whole political status quo.
I'd say it's pretty telling that instead of engaging with the actual substance of what these students are saying, the entire discussion is, this word or that word, this was incorrect. When it's like, no, deal with the facts, the reality. Every day we see this. And I honestly, I think people are waking up to this. I think this has become, like, so many people are saying, no, enough is enough. What these students are saying, what the Palestinians are going through, it's horrible, right? I kind of want to go into part of the reason that we know what's happening on the ground. I think the biggest reason that we know the details of the atrocities of people being bombed, of innocent children being pulled out of rubble, of doctors that don't have medicinal need, like resources to be able to help the people in need. All of that. One of the core reasons we're seeing this is because of very brave Palestinian and journalists from Gaza. So many of us have watched Palestinian journalists like Abu Bakr Abed, Bisan, Mu'taz Aziza, Plastia, and many, many others who are it's fascinating. They're able to so excellently articulate the severity of genocide with such immense clarity. It's like they're professionals. Many people don't know that these heroes are actually very young. Can you speak about how young change makers have such poise and political maturity at the ages of just 19, 20, and 26 that we're seeing in Gaza? And maybe what the rest of the Muslim youth around the world can learn from them and their ability to make impact?
Yeah, there's a really sad reality around this. And, I'll say it straight. It's that the fact that Palestinians don't have this privilege of kind of growing into political awareness. They are born into it, and we've seen that. Their lives are politicized before they can even read. They walk through rubble to get to school. They memorize the names of martyrs, of their friends, unlike other children around the world who are learning names of cartoon characters. And so Palestinians don't have this choice. They don't have the option to take time figuring things out. And they're not just raised into political maturity. Almost Israel's oppression forces it on them. And that's what we've seen with Bisan, with Mu'taz, with Pind, Plistia, all of them. When your home is under occupation, when you're facing daily colonial violence and displacement, you have two options. And those two options are either they grow up really fast or either they don't make it at all, they don't survive. And so that kind of pressure makes this all a necessity. It's not a choice. And what we're seeing with Abu Bakr, Bisan, Mu'taz, Plistia isn't just a product of formal education. It's not just this political awakening, a process of it. It's like a direct lived consequence of this relentless genocide that we've been seeing, this occupation and this oppression. They've learned to turn pain into power. And this resilience isn't some abstract idea, it's survival for them. It's resistance, it's refusing to be erased. It's a duty, they see it, having to, because I talked about live streaming in the past and things were different, but they're live streaming it right now and they've been doing it for the past how long and nothing has changed.
Yeah.
We thought that, okay, everything is live streamed. You can see the footage of the worst massacres we have seen. And yet that hasn't changed anything. It hasn't stopped the UK from stopping selling arms to Israel. But for them, regardless, they are continuing, right? They don't have the luxury to grow politically naive or to be disengaged. So it's not a choice. It is what they see as a responsibility. But then we also have a responsibility, and that is to channel pain into action. And they have shown us a powerful example of what faith, what courage, what determination can look like in the toughest times. And that's something that every Muslim everywhere, every human can learn from wherever we are. And I'm sure so many Muslims and young people are feeling deflated, thinking that, this feeling of guilt, it's eating a lot of us up, this helplessness, this, okay, is this even doing much? What's the point of this? It's heavy and a lot of us are carrying it, but especially when there's so much injustice and the genocide worsening day by day, we start to feel like nothing that we do matters. And I want to flip this thinking a little bit, and I want to flip it into a way where we have to start thinking in the way that everything that we do matters, even when it doesn't feel big. It's just about showing up. It's about showing up in ways that are true to ourselves. You know, we all have different skills. We're all comfortable doing different things. So whether that's protesting, whether that's writing, educating yourself and others, joining your Palestine society if you're at university, donating, boycotting, even things like creating art, right? Checking in on your people.
Yeah.
Speaking up when it's hard. All of it counts. And guilt can freeze you. It can really freeze us. But responsibility is what can move you. And this struggle that we're in, it's long, right? It's generational. And I always say it's a long journey. Gaza cannot walk it alone. We need you. So you might not see the results tomorrow, but your effort is part of a much bigger story. And here I like to remind people, like, think about all of the people who fought before us, knowing they didn't know if they'd win, right? And we're here because they didn't give up. So it's about starting from where you are, with what you have, and knowing that your voice, your presence, your action, your intention, whatever it is, it does make a difference. And when we all move together, that's when things really shift. Everything we do is a refusal to be silent in this. Everything we do is a part of something bigger. And in every action, you know, we will be questioned about what we did to stop this genocide.
When we think about political maturity, right, we think of seasoned politicians. We think of the pundits on TV. We think of academics, you know, with a history book or something like that. Yet we see the rise of younger Muslims engaging politically. Yes, but many of them also want to step into the playing field. You did that. You ran as a 23-year-old independent candidate in the riding of Ilford North. And as we said before, you came so close to unseating Labour's Wes Streeting, the UK's Secretary of Health. How does one develop a politically conscious mind? For you, was political consciousness something passed down in your household, or was something you were awakened to through your life experiences?
As a Palestinian, political consciousness was definitely passed down in my household. You know, my grandparents, they lived the Nakbah, the occupation, the daily struggle. And so from a young age, I was hearing the stories. I was waking up to things and understanding that, you know, what we face isn't just personal, it's political. And it was like a living history being passed down, but not just through words, but through our reality every day. And it was through my own experiences. Like, I remember visiting the refugee camp that my father grew up in for the first time at a very young age. And that's when I really started to see things differently. That's when things really became urgent for me. Those early moments, they showed me that, okay, this injustice, it isn't distant, it's personal, it's collective, it's something that's still affecting us today. It's why, you know, it's why I'm here, right? And my parents taught me that, you know, our struggle is tied to everyone's struggle for justice, that we are connected beyond borders, that resisting oppression is a responsibility, not a choice. And it made me realize that my voice matters, that standing up is necessary. And I saw it as almost like I saw myself in a very privileged position where I should be using whatever facilities, whatever skills I have to make a difference. So yeah, my political awareness was both inherited and lived. It was rooted in family, but it was definitely fueled by the experiences that I had in my life. They shaped everything, and they shaped how I view the injustices around me and how I understand my role within the broader ummah. Your question around, like, how does one develop a conscious mind? I think that we're all seeing this injustice. And if you're seeing this injustice, and if your heart is unsettled, and if your faith is really pushing you to do something, if your faith is pushing you to act, then you're ready already. You know, you don't need to have it all figured out. It's just about bringing your values, your voice, and your willingness to stand up, to stand firm. And that's how political consciousness starts. It doesn't really start with perfection. It starts with purpose. It's about knowing what your purpose is, renewing your intention, asking yourself, why am I doing this? You know, what am I getting out of this? And, you know, again, it's not about self-interest.
Yeah.
It has to be about something much bigger. It's about what you owe the people around you. And I believe that's really what Gaza has taught us.
What were the first moments of your activism, and how did those look like?
So many people don't actually know this, but my activism journey actually began at the age of 15. And those who probably know, they'd recognize me as the girl who spoke out and was silenced, or the girl who was censored for freedom. And so when I was 15 years old, I was called an ISIS girl for winning a speakers competition where I raised the issue of Palestine. And my English teacher at my secondary school, Wanstead High School in Redbridge, she nominated me to take part in the Jack Petchey Speak Out Challenge. This is the largest speaking competition for young people in the world. At the time, I was just a very shy, I'd say sort of introverted girl who was literally the girl in the class who would never put her hand up, who would just keep her head down and get her work done, right? And so I could have never imagined. I remember as soon as I got that letter that I was nominated, I was literally standing in line, ready to go into my mock exams. We had GCSEs around the corner. I was like, what is this? What's going on? And surely there must be a mistake. But my teacher really believed in me. And she was basically the one who pushed me to do this. And when she pushed me, I almost thought, okay, you're asking me to speak out in front of all these people, my classmates, right? How many people in my year group actually know about Palestine? How many people know about where I'm from? And at the time, I remember, a few weeks prior to that, my baby cousin had passed away, who was a Palestinian refugee in Lebanon, who was denied medical care because he was Palestinian. He had to have open heart surgery. He was only one, and he couldn't travel to receive that medical care and treatment. And then that really started to make me really wonder about, why does he not have that right? Why do we have rights that are different to them? It really made me think about the world and how it works and the injustices around us. And I was like, okay, if there's one thing that is worth me speaking up for, then I'm going to use my voice for Palestine. And so I delivered a speech titled Birds, Not Bombs, and it won first place with rapturous applause from the audience. And my basic message was, Palestinians, my people, were human beings and their plight was a stain on humanity. And, I remember my parents, they couldn't believe it, that they were coming to watch me speak out competition. Like, it was something they never expected, right? And I never thought I would win. Like, as soon as I walked into that competition, there was around 25 other people from different boroughs, different schools in my area. And they were like these loud characters. And I was just there. I was just like, oh my God,
Oh no.
I'm the wrong person.
What am I doing
my
here?
school got to represent, right? And my school had never won the competition before, right? So I was like, oh my God, I'm going to let them down. Like, I don't know what I've got myself into, what my teacher has got me into. But I was like, you know what? More people to educate, right? Let me use this opportunity, regardless of what happens. And then subhanAllah, my speech won first place and I couldn't believe it. And like looking back now to 10 years ago, how did a speech on Palestine win such a competition?
Yeah.
And so after winning the competition, I was so proud of my achievement. My family was so proud, my school, everyone. And the video went viral. And, embarrassingly, you can still see it online. But then that's when the hate really started. And at first it was this trickle, and then it was the barrage, and online trolls bombarded my school's Twitter account, and that had to be shut down. And then before you knew it, videos started to be made about me, about things like basically labeling me a good little Miss ISIS girl.
Islamophobia. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was subjected to this avalanche of online abusive comments and videos just for speaking about Palestine. I still remember, the very phrases that were used. They were calling me things like a 15-year-old suicide bomber,
Wow.
an ISIS recruiter who needs to be burnt alive, an evil anti-Semitic KKK Nazi schoolgirl who needs to be jailed permanently. And believe me, this was just the tip of the iceberg. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And the police were called, and they could only advise to shut down my Twitter. To basically be quiet and this will go away. But I refused to be silent. It was a confusing time, but definitely a formative one for me. And I think the pain taught me one thing, and that is to never succumb to their intimidation. Silence is defeat, right? It's this form of inactive participation in a crime. You become an accessory in a settler colonialism that wants you to trade lives for an inconsequential life. And so I stood my ground, and then the support started pouring in. It was so heartwarming. The hashtag Let Leanne Speak went viral, and I was receiving overwhelming support from so many people that I didn't even know. And that's when people started to learn my name, and I couldn't believe how viral the story went. It was almost like they tried to silence me, but they helped it go even further, right? And so I learned a valuable lesson about resilience, about determination, and with pain comes resilience, right? And that was the lesson I learned from my grandparents. Resilience, again, is what the people of Gaza are teaching us all today. And, we don't hear of people that give up on faith and family when they face this horrendous onslaught right now in Gaza. But what we are seeing are upright people. They are teaching us how to live, not live lives of inconsequence, but to live lives that matter, and lives that will make us feel that at the end of our time, we try to make a change. And even if we don't see this change within our lifetime, we made something of our lives. Now, going past, because obviously I was only 15 at the time, I continued to speak up, and many people started giving me platforms to speak at different conferences, events, universities, parliament, and I was speaking at events both nationally and internationally. And I just continued. They really thought they silenced me, but they actually, in a way, like, now every time I'm criticized, it doesn't faze me as much because I went through the experience at such a young age. So I'm so grateful to have gone through that experience because it's really shaped me into who I am today. So as difficult as it was, I feel like it was a blessing in disguise. So I continued, and within my university years, I was very active. I led the KCL Students for Justice for Palestine Society. I was involved a lot with the student union. I became a student trustee. And I was also very involved in FOSIS during uni. So all these experiences shaped who I am today. But, when the slaughter of the people of Gaza started 20 months ago now, I vowed to myself that that's it. We have to do so much more. Life can never be the same again. We can't and we will not stand by whilst bombs drop on innocents. And we are realizing, these bombs are being made here by munitions companies licensed by our British government. And I realized that to stop this genocide, I needed to make the politicians listen. And that's why I decided to put my name forward. Alhamdulillah, I was selected to be the independent candidate for my hometown, Ilford North. And I did this out of a deep sense of responsibility. And when people ask me, why did you decide to stand, Leanne? I always tell them, in a word, Gaza was the reason why me, why you, and why so many good people across the country decided that enough was enough. Gaza symbolizes something greater. It brought us out of our slumber. It made us realize that this political system is broken. And in a way, the two-party system is rigged against us. It forces us to choose the lesser of two evils. But the reality is that we can't see anything but evil. So one thing about me is I never shy away from what brought me into politics. The injustices that we see abroad, they directly reflect the callousness with which politicians, red or blue, treat people at home. And that's exactly what we're seeing today. I'm no career politician. My ambition is that we rise and fight together against the continued neglect of our communities. And that's sort of the journey that I've been on to get to this stage.
I think that's a profound example a lot of people can reflect on. A challenge, a difficulty, a test that was thrown at you. And it's beautifully, rather, in a sweet sort of irony, it transformed you into the change maker that you are today, inshallah. And I think somewhere out there, there's other young Muslim brothers and sisters that are going through the same thing. They're in university and they're in high school. They're part of their ISOCs. They're part of their SJPs, their Palestinian clubs. They're part of FOSIS. And they too want to become a change maker. And they want to make a difference in the world. What's some practical advice you can give someone who wants to walk in the shoes you walked in, and as someone who's been through that experience of entering politics?
I think the most important bit of advice I would give them is to never separate faith from your fight, right? Islam, we shouldn't see it as a barrier to activism. I think it's literally the engine. It keeps us principled, when the politics gets messy, and it does get messy. And so, it's our faith that remind us that justice is not just a trending buzzword, it's an obligation. And that, when no one is watching, Allah is. And when we act from that place, when we have this sincerity, this sabr, this good intention, we're already, you're already miles ahead of half the people in power. And right now, probably way more than half. But I would say, start building, build community, build coalitions, build on your skills that Allah has blessed you with, right? Find your skills, recognize what your skills are and build on them. Use them for good. volunteer, don't be afraid to get involved. I always tell people, look, I was involved in so many different initiatives growing up. And in so many of them, I would literally be the youngest person in the room. And looking back now, I always question, how did I even have the courage to even be there, right? And it's honestly just because I was so determined to learn. I was yearning to do more. I wanted to learn more. And alhamdulillah, it didn't faze me. And I think those experiences are what made me into the person I am today. And I think it's also about reminding yourself that sometimes people will make you feel like you don't belong, but you do. So, go after those opportunities with everything you've got. You're not too young, you're not too Muslim, you're not too angry. And you're exactly what this moment needs. And I think one of the most important things as young Muslims is for us to never compromise our values and our principles, for us to stay true to ourselves, and in everything that we do, maintain our values. I always try to renew my intentions. And I told you before, I don't compromise on the reason why I went into politics, but also I try to be completely confident in my Muslim identity. So that's something that we should always remember, I feel. And something from the heart is, I strongly encourage young people to take care of their souls, because this fight is so heavy. It's not easy at all. It's tough. And you will be criticized so much. And it's going to be very difficult, but we shouldn't let that hinder us. Because as I said, my biggest challenges were a blessing in disguise looking back now. And also we shouldn't expect quick wins. It's a long game and we might not see the change tomorrow, but that doesn't mean that we stop. It means that we go in even harder. And we know that success is by Allah. We just remain unapologetic. We maintain our values and we do our bit, and the rest is tawakkul.
Then there are those people who aren't running themselves, but they want to be able to support the people that do. They want to grow our grassroots political advocacy and these movements into long-term political agency for the Muslim community and those people who stand against genocide. What role should the community play here in supporting such people that want to make change?
Honestly, I believe that these people are some of the most important in our movement, in our communities. The people behind the scenes, the ones who are organizing, the ones who are volunteering, canvassing, calling, showing up early, the ones who stay so late, the ones driving people around. They're just as important, if not as the ones who are running, right? Because you don't need to be on the ballot to be part of the movement. And I think that's something that we really need to just emphasize, right? It's something that we really need to remember. We don't all need to be candidates, right? It's actually the force behind the candidate that change everything. You just need to show up, be reliable, be consistent, and show up with intention, because we need campaign managers. We need so many fundraisers. We need policy researchers. We need event planners. We need data analysts. We need youth mobilizers, graphic designers. We need all of it. And trust me, I don't even know one candidate who has all those skills. I definitely don't. But if you've got skills, bring them. And if you don't, learn them, because building political power isn't just about winning elections. It's about building this infrastructure that can outlast any single campaign. And think about all these people with all these amazing skills coming together and what we collectively can do for the ummah, the greater good that we can do with all these talented individuals. On the canvassing part, I think, we weren't taught to knock on doors or hand out flyers growing up.
And have those conversations.
I feel like our community mainly focused more on charity work, which is obviously beautiful, it's necessary, but we left a vacuum in political spaces. And that's why we found it difficult in the last general election, because a lot of us were starting up from nowhere. We were building a whole infrastructure, because I was running as an independent, building a whole infrastructure out of nothing, and teaching people how to canvass from scratch. For me, I always tell people, I was a Labour member since I was 17. The first time I canvassed was when I was canvassing for my campaign. I did not know how to canvass prior. But the beauty of it is that so many people got politically involved. So many people are more politically aware. And so, in the past, I guess others filled this political vacuum that we left, but now we are coming back and we are building stronger. And it just goes to show that our community, we need political education that's accessible, that's rooted in our communities. We shouldn't just be teaching people what's wrong. We should be teaching them how power works, how to challenge it. And this real grassroots power, it really comes from this consistent organizing, from accountability, from building trust in our communities. It's about turning the anger that we have, the frustration, into these sustained movements that demand real change. And maybe most importantly, it's like rejecting this idea that someone will come to save us. The power is with us, and we have to own it. We have to develop it. We have to use it. And that's how we build political agency that lasts. And I'm sure there are so many young people thinking, look, I'm not a politician. I don't even want to be a politician. I have no interest in that. But perfect. That's who we need, right?
Yeah, you got to play your part in here.
Exactly, because every single role matters. There is no just in this work. You're not just a supporter. You're not just a canvasser. You're not just this. You are the reason change happens in the first place. Because these political movements, they're not built on heroes or like these candidates. They're built on communities. They're built on networks. They're built on people who commit and people who organize, who don't need the spotlight. Just literally a cause that's worth standing for. And, if that's you, then you are already in the right place. And that's where you have to build from.
Definitely. I think in terms of long-term agency, we need to understand also that, as you mentioned, it's not going to happen overnight. I think we often think election to election, but I think we should be thinking throughout the year, it's not just every next 5 years. In fact, there's a quote, just going to bring it up, that a Muslim should not think of the last 5 years and the 5 years after that and the 5 years after that, but rather, as the scholar Nizam al-Mulk once said, that a Muslim should be thinking about 50 years before, 50 years after that, and 50 years after. The long-term vision and getting involved in the stuff from now, like those 17-year-old, 18-year-olds, if you get involved now, by the time you're 26, by the time you're 27, by the time you're 30, 40, 50, exactly. There's going to be so much involvement and people like yourself that inshallah they'll be able to support in upcoming elections. Leanne, just to go back a bit, I know you mentioned about the ideas of faith and how important it is to stick to your understanding of faith and spirituality and focusing on the soul. When we're talking about the Nakbah and the horrors, I'm reminded of the ayah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where he says in the Quran, الَّذِينَ قَالَ لَهُمُ النَّاسُ إِنَّ النَّاسَ قَدْ جَمَعُوا لَكُمْ فَاخْشَوْهُمْ فَزَادَهُمْ إِيمَانًا وَقَالُوا حَسْبُنَا اللَّهُ وَنِعْمَ الْوَكِيلُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, to those whom people said, indeed, the people have gathered against you, so fear them. But it only increased them in faith. فَزَادَتْهُمْ إِيمَانًا. And they said, Allah is sufficient for us and He is the best disposer of affairs. Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakeel is something we see in every Palestinian video. No matter how sad and brutal it is, we see them say these words. There's something special about these words and these ayat that they resonate with. Everyone has certain principles that drive them. You've mentioned how faith is a core principle. How important and what are your Islamic principles and values that you yourself think about, but you want young Muslims to really, really focus on when they want to make change?
So faith isn't just a part of my life. It's almost like the lens that I see the world through. And it's what shapes my politics, it's what shapes my activism, it shapes the way I lead and the way I try to serve. And, being Muslim, being a visible Muslim woman in a hijab, has never felt like a barrier to me. In fact, it's been the source of my strength. And I always say faith is deeply woven into every part of my life. Life simply has no meaning without it, and I don't understand how people live without faith. But being Muslim has shaped my worldview in powerful ways, particularly the emphasis that Islam places on justice, on compassion, on service to others. And so when I speak up against oppression, when I organize, when I campaign, that's not just a political act, it's a spiritual one, it's ibadah. And this is something that we forget. Islam teaches us to lead with empathy. It teaches us to listen to the communities that we serve and to always look for the humanity in others, even when we disagree. And I've learned a lot of lessons, I think, throughout the campaign and throughout my life, throughout my activism. I have learned, and my faith has reminded me that, activism without empathy is hollow, that we fight for people and not just against systems, that even in our anger, we have to lead with this love. And in a world that encourages so much self-interest, Islam's call to serve something greater than oneself is what keeps me rooted. We live in a world where, you're told to almost like serve yourself, to chase this status. And, Islam flips that. It tells you to serve something bigger than you. And speak truth when it costs you, and to stand firm even when you're alone. And this is exactly what I try to stick by. You know, my faith doesn't just guide what I fight for, but it guides how I fight for it, right? So for young Muslims who want to step into activism, to politics, into advocacy, whether it's on Palestine, you know, whether it's on racism, climate, housing, whatever it may be, bring your Islam with you, right? Don't water it down. Don't tuck it away for others to be more comfortable. Don't shy away from your Muslim identity. It's what keeps us principled, especially when systems try to corrupt us. You know, it keeps us patient when we feel hopeless. It keeps us humble when the success finally comes. And so we have to lead with our values. We have to be unapologetic because it's not about ambition. It's about amana, the responsibility that we have. And we answer to something higher. And that's something we always have to remember.
Leanne Mohammad, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self?
Actually, I want to go way before that. And I want to go to the 15-year-old me. And if I could sit down with the 15-year-old me, you know, the nervous, the hopeful girl who was standing at the podium for the very first time in her life, you know, in front of so many people that just looked like monsters who were going to eat me alive, I tell her, you know, you are more powerful than you know, and you don't have to have it all figured out, right? You know, my fear, I'd remind her that fear is not a weakness. It is often it's signs that you're stepping into something meaningful. And, you know, people will doubt you, they will question your place, they will sometimes even try to silence you, but your voice will carry and it will matter. And most importantly, I would remind her that you don't have to fit into anyone's mold to make a difference, right? Our strength as Muslims comes from our diversity, from our resilience, from our unshakable values. And, you know, never let anyone make you feel that your faith or your identity or your background is a limitation, because in fact, it's our foundation. It is something that we have to hold on to and be proud of. And I've learned that growth comes from doing the hard things, even when they're a bit uncomfortable, and that failure isn't the opposite of success. It's literally the part of the path. So yeah, I tell her to trust her instincts, always choose integrity over popularity, and stay rooted in your values no matter what, no matter how loud the noise gets. Always put integrity first. And yeah, you know, I just say keep going. You're going to hopefully move hearts and open doors, not just for yourself, but for so many other people as well.
Jazakallahu khairan, and thank you for tuning in to The Thinking Youth.
Jazakallah khair.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Please remember to subscribe to our social media and YouTube channels, and head over to our website thinkingmuslim.com to sign up to my weekly newsletter. Jazakallah khair.